You know the path they always tell you to follow, right?
Yeah.
The one that involves working for decades, maybe climbing some corporate ladder that feels more like a hamster wheel sometimes.
Yeah, and all the while you feel kind of tied down, like your life is just dictated by expenses and bills.
Exactly. But what if? What if there was another way, a way to break free from that? Maybe years, even decades, earlier than you thought possible.
A way to, stop trading all your time just for a paycheck and actually build a life where you call the shots on how you spend your days. That's the really exciting possibility here.
That's the mission for this book talk, finance. We're diving into Set for Life, an all-out approach to early financial freedom by Scott Trench. And this isn't just like theory.
No, not at all. It's really positioned as a practical blueprint for anyone feeling a bit stuck, maybe, or just tired of the same old advice about money and careers.
And the author, Scott Trench, he actually lived this. He started as a financial analyst, looked at the typical path and thought, no, this isn't the freedom I want.
Right. He actively chased financial freedom, used real estate investing quite a bit, and, eventually became the CEO of Bigger Pockets. His story shows it's doable, it's actionable, not just academic.
So this book talk is basically your shortcut to grabbing the core ideas, the key strategies from Set for Life. Ideas that could genuinely change how you think about your time, your money, your whole life.
It's all about gaining that freedom, that choice, so you don't need a wage income to live how you want to live.
Okay, let's get into it. The foundation is this idea of financial freedom. What does that actually mean, according to the book?
Well, at its heart, it's defined as the ability to completely direct your own day without needing income from a job. Basically, you're placing the money you have to earn by working.
With income your assets generate for you, passive income.
Exactly. Passive income covering your expenses.
And the book really hammers home that this isn't just about being super rich, is it?
Not at all. The real power, the book argues, the power of wealth and passive income is that they buy you choice. That's the ultimate prize, total control over your time, your energy, your decisions.
To help you figure out where you are on this journey, the book lays out 4 levels of finance. Can you walk us through those? It seems like a useful framework.
Sure. It starts at the bottom, cash flow negative. This is, well, it's tough. Constant financial stress, often drowning in debt, makes it feel impossible to get ahead.
Feels pretty bleak.
It can be. But the good news, or the insight here, is that even though it's hard, focused effort at this stage can bring really dramatic improvements quite quickly, actually, just to get stable.
Okay, so you work hard, you move up to.
Cash flow neutral, that sounds okay, I guess. Ordinary.
Yeah, and that's the trap. This level is where you might be doing all the right things your peers are doing. Keeping up, paying bills, maybe saving a tiny bit. You feel like you're on track with the neighbors.
But the book isn't a fan of just being neutral, is it? Not at all. This is where it kind of hits you with that reality check. It describes this level as basically being stuck, even if you're doing what seems responsible. And there's that quote.
Oh, the VP quote.
Yeah.
That one's powerful.
Right. The best possible outcome, should I continue with my current career and savings rate, is that I end up in my VP's office over there, doing his job and doing it all day long, every day of the week.
Oof, yeah. That really makes you stop and think. So the insight is that neutral isn't good enough. It's just inertia.
Exactly. It's realizing that just following the crowd might lead you to a life you don't actually want, even if it looks successful from the outside.
So what changes when you finally break through to cash flow positive?
This is where the momentum really starts to build. It might not look flashy on the outside, maybe no fancy car yet, but internally, things are different. You have extra money each month.
You have options with that money.
Right. You're starting to build capital, maybe exploring side businesses, looking at acquiring assets that produce income. You're actively seeking out opportunities because you can. You have that positive cash flow to direct.
And then the ultimate goal, financially free.
This is it. Enough passive income flowing in from your assets to cover all your living expenses. You don't need to work for money anymore.
So you can work on things you're passionate about.
Precisely. Passion projects, hobbies, maybe building an empire if that's your thing. The key is total intentional control over your time, every single day.
So the framework isn't just definitions, it's a mirror. It forces you to ask, where am I now?
Yeah.
And is this where I want to end up?
Yeah.
That's a really strong starting point.
Definitely. Which leads right into part 1 of the book, famously titled, The First $25,000 is the Hardest. And it makes a very strong case for why nailing this first phase is absolutely critical.
The core idea here is that wealth building, especially when you're just starting out, it begins with being really frugal, right?
Hmm.
And designing your lifestyle on purpose. Why focus on cutting expenses first?
Well, simply put, it's the lever you have the most immediate control over. Right now. Today.
Yeah, you don't need anyone's permission to pack a lunch instead of buying one.
Exactly. Earning a lot more takes time, maybe new skills. Investing needs capital you might not have yet. But cutting spending? You can start now. It's instantly actionable.
And it does something else important, doesn't it? It builds
Yeah.
runway.
Yes, financial runway. That's a key concept. It's not just a small emergency fund. It's building up enough accessible after-tax cash to cover your living expenses for a significant period the book pushes for, aiming towards a full year's worth eventually.
And the Liz example in the book really drives this home. The difference saving 10% versus 50% makes.
It's huge. Liz earns $50 after tax. If she saves 10%, that's $5K a year. Her expenses are $45K. It takes her 9 years to save 1 year's worth of runway. 9 years.
Wow.
But if she gets aggressive, adopts a set-for-life approach, cuts her expenses down to $25K, suddenly she's saving 50%, $25K a year. Now she builds a full year of runway every single year.
That's a staggering difference. It highlights how much impact spending has.
It's arguably the most impactful variable you control early on. Plus, there's the tax angle. A penny saved is truly more than a penny earned because you don't pay income tax on money you don't spend.
So, okay, aggressive frugality. How do you actually do that without feeling totally deprived? What are the strategies?
A big one is cultivating a do-it-yourself mindset. Now, this doesn't mean you have to do everything forever.
Right, not like building your own house from scratch.
No. But initially, tackling things like filing your own taxes, maybe basic car stuff, simple home repairs like that running toilet example in the book, it saves money directly, sure. But more than that, it builds your competence. You understand how things work. So if you do hire someone later, you make better decisions. You know what questions to ask.
It's about empowerment, not just being cheap.
Exactly. Another strategy is consciously rejecting the need for the best. The book argues we're often conditioned to want the premium version of everything, the best car, the fanciest wine, the latest TV.
And that premium comes at a premium price.
A massive premium price. And often the actual improvement in quality or happiness is tiny, maybe even imperceptible. Chasing the best all the time is incredibly expensive and dramatically slows down your path to freedom.
So where should you focus your frugal efforts for the biggest wins?
On the big rocks first. Look at where most of your money goes, usually the fixed costs. The book suggests analyzing your spending like their average Joe breakdown and hitting the major categories hard.
Like food, transportation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Food. Eating healthy homemade meals versus constantly eating out or getting takeout. Transportation. This is a huge one. The book talks about the massive, often hidden costs of commuting, referencing Mr. Money Mustache's work.
Yeah, the idea that biking or just driving less can save thousands. Remote work must amplify that now, too.
Immensely. Then there's insurance. The book has an interesting take here.
Yeah, what's the angle?
It frames insurance primarily as a tool to eliminate fear and major distractions. So once you've built up some financial runway, maybe you can increase your deductibles significantly to lower your premiums. You're essentially self-insuring for smaller bumps because you have the cash.
That makes sense. Take on calculated risk when you can afford it.
Right. And it strongly warns against things like whole life insurance. The Daryl example highlights the pitfalls. It pushes towards fee-only financial planners if you need advice, people who aren't earning commissions selling you products.
Healthcare is another big one. How does that fit in?
It connects directly to lifestyle choices. Regular exercise, healthy eating, these aren't just health habits, they're financial habits. They lower long-term health costs, boost your energy, your productivity. It all ties back.
And education. Obviously, this book itself is a form of education.
True. Education is incredibly powerful for boosting income. Investing time and maybe some money in learning high-value, scalable skills can be life-changing. But
There's a but.
there's a but for early financial freedom seekers. The book cautions against automatically assuming an expensive traditional degree is the best path if the ROI isn't clearly there or if it doesn't lead to significantly higher scalable income quickly. That time and money might be better deployed elsewhere early on.
Okay, so you're cutting costs, saving aggressively. What do you actually do with that money you're saving in part one?
Priority number 1, obliterate high-interest debt. Get rid of it. The book mentions using methods like the debt snowball or focusing on the highest interest rate first. It even suggests trying to negotiate older debts down.
And improving your credit score is part of this, too.
Definitely. Paying down debt helps. You might also strategically increase credit limits on cards you already have without spending more to lower your overall credit utilization ratio. Good credit gives you access to better loan terms later, especially for things like property.
So what are the concrete milestones in this first hard part?
The book lays out 3 key steps. First, just get a small emergency fund together, maybe $1,000 or $2,000. Peace of mind. Second, pay off all that bad debt, credit cards, personal loans, get yourself to 0 net worth, or ideally, slightly positive.
And the third big one.
Build that initial $10,000 to $25,000 in accessible working capital, that financial runway we talked about, aiming for roughly a year's worth of your reduced expenses.
And that cash isn't just rotting in a checking account.
No, ideally it's in something accessible, but maybe earning a bit more, like an after-tax brokerage account invested conservatively or high-yield savings. But the key is access, because the really profound insight here
This is what that runway buys you.
Exactly. It buys you access to opportunity. It gives you leverage, options, breathing room.
Like the Bobby example in the book, having even a small runway let him escape a bad living situation that was financially draining and controlling.
Precisely. It buys you the option to maybe take a calculated risk on a better job offer, even if it pays less initially, or to start that side project, or just to handle a layoff without total panic. That freedom, that optionality, that's the real return on investment for that first 25K. It's escape velocity.
Okay, escape velocity achieved. You built the 25K runway. You're off the launch pad. Part 2 is about hitting the accelerator, going from 25K towards 100K. What are the main engines for this stage?
2 big ones. Tackling your housing costs in a radical way and significantly boosting your income potential.
And the book starts with housing by repeating that key idea. Your primary home is usually an expense, right? Not an investment in the traditional sense, not for early FI.
Correct. It drains cash flow month after month. So the goal is to neutralize or even reverse that.
And the book's favorite strategy for this is?
House hacking. It presents this as probably the single most advantageous move you can make with your first property purchase.
Explain house hacking again briefly.
Sure. It's basically buying a property, maybe a duplex, triplex, fourplex, or even just a larger single-family house with extra rooms, or a basement suite living in one part of it and renting out the other units or rooms.
So your tenants are essentially paying your mortgage.
That's the goal. Ideally, the rent covers your entire mortgage, taxes, insurance, maybe even some maintenance, or at the very least, it drastically reduces your own housing cost.
So you live for free or very, very cheaply.
Exactly. Think about Garrett's example in the book. Single guy buys a duplex, lives in one side, rents the other. His housing cost drops to near 0. All that money he would have spent on rent or a mortgage is now freed up.
Where could he put that freed up money?
Into other investments, accelerating wealth building massively. The book even shows mathematically how house hacking often requires less cash up front than renting or buying a single-family home the traditional way, while building equity much faster. Joe's example illustrates this well.
It sounds almost too good to be true financially. But what about the downsides? Living with tenants, being a landlord.
The book acknowledges its work. It's not entirely passive, especially at first. You have to screen tenants carefully, manage the property, deal with issues. It frames it as a trade-off. You exchange some time and effort for a massive financial advantage.
A manageable challenge, perhaps, compared to the drag of high housing costs.
That's the argument. It also touches on other ways to buy property, like way no for buying with options, or Ashley's example of forcing appreciation through improvements. But house hacking, way number 5, is presented as the most powerful initial move for accelerating towards that $100 K mark.
Okay, so optimizing housing is one engine. The other is boosting income. And the book throws some cold water on the popular side hustle idea, doesn't it?
It really does, especially for people starting out, maybe earning a median wage. The argument is, look, trying to make a fortune, dedicating maybe 5 or 10 hours a week, that tiny slice of your time after a demanding full-time job paying $25 an hour. It's just not efficient.
So your energy is better spent elsewhere, initially at least.
That's the claim. Your primary focus should be on increasing your earning power within your main working hours or by changing your main source of income altogether.
So if not side hustles, what is the key to scaling income faster?
The book makes a pretty provocative point here. Traditional, salaried, specialized jobs, while seemingly secure, are often the worst kind of job if your goal is rapid income scaling for early financial freedom.
Whoa, okay, that definitely goes against the grain. Why?
Because your income is often capped, you're limited by annual reviews, company pay bands. You might spend tons of energy on tasks that don't scale or directly contribute to major value creation. It can be, frankly, a bit soul-sucking sometimes, focused on small, incremental wins.
So the alternative is?
Get into a field or a role where your income potential is more directly tied to your performance, the value you create, and where there isn't necessarily an artificial cap. Think sales, starting a business, certain types of consulting, or roles with significant equity potential.
Like Scott Trench himself moving from analyst to a startup role. Or the Clay example, real estate assistant to software developer via bootcamp, dramatically increasing his earning potential.
Exactly. Shifting into fields where skills are in high demand and compensation can scale rapidly. The book points out that for many of these roles, like software development, you don't always need a fancy 4-year degree. You need to demonstrate the skill, show you can code, deliver results.
And this is where that $25,000 runway becomes absolutely crucial again.
It's everything, because making that kind of switch maybe to a commission-based role or taking time off for a boot camp or joining a startup with a lower base salary but high potential involves risk. It's the cost of opportunity the book talks about.
That runway gives you the buffer, the confidence to take that calculated risk.
Without it, you're often stuck. You feel you can't leave the secure but capped job because you need that steady paycheck next week. That runway buys you the freedom to pursue higher potential paths. It even mentions people like Ellie missing out on easy wins like ESPPs because they're just stuck in default mode.
So the insight is, actively seek roles where your income can scale based on value, not just time served. Combine that with crushing your housing costs. And that's the rocket fuel for getting from $25K to $100.
Right, you've built the foundation with frugality, now you're adding leverage through housing and income.
Okay, so you've made it. You've hustled, house hacked, maybe switched careers.
Yeah.
You've hit $100,000 in net worth, maybe more. Now we're in part 3, the journey from $100 to actual financial freedom. What's the focus now?
Now it's really about putting that capital to work effectively. It's about aggressive, intelligent investing.
The book kicks this off with an interesting comparison, like Cal Johnson's athletic talent versus the author's. A small difference in ability leads to a huge income gap.
Yeah, it acknowledges those huge income disparities exist. Like a 30% difference in athletic ability might mean a 20,000% difference in income, but then it pivots hard.
How so?
It argues that massive income doesn't automatically equal massive happiness or a better quality of life defined by freedom. Is driving a Lamborghini really that much better than a reliable Corolla if the Lambo costs you years of extra work? Is fine dining every night better than a great homemade meal with friends if the fancy meals keep you chained to your desk?
So the person with freedom, even with less flashy stuff, might actually be happier.
That's the argument. The real inequality that matters for freedom isn't just income, it's wealth accumulation. People like Warren Buffett aren't just high earners. They are masters at making their money generate more money.
Which leads to a really critical concept in the book. Real assets versus false assets. You need to know the difference.
Absolutely crucial. False assets, these are things that might look like assets on paper, maybe in a traditional accounting sense, but they actually cost you money. They require cash to buy and maintain, they don't produce income, and they often go down in value.
Like cars, most furniture. Your primary residence if it's not generating income.
Exactly. Cars, primary residences, unless house hacked. Fancy furniture, maybe even that expensive degree if it didn't significantly boost earning power, collectibles, art. The book calls it double trouble when you buy these false assets using debt. You're paying interest on something that's costing you money and losing value. Ouch.
And then there's that kind of controversial bonus false asset.
Yeah. The cash flow negative partner, it's blunt, but the book stresses how vital it is for couples to be aligned on financial goals if they want to achieve early financial freedom together. Misalignment can be a huge drag.
So real assets are the opposite. They make you money.
Essentially, yes. Real assets are things that generate income for you or have a very strong potential to appreciate significantly over time, ideally both. Think income-producing rental properties, shares in profitable businesses, maybe dividend-paying stocks or bonds. These are the things that work for you.
Where do things like traditional retirement accounts, 401k, IRAs fit in? The book seems a little cautious about relying only on these for early freedom.
It sees them as vehicles for holding investments, which is good, but the main drawback for early retirees is access. You often face penalties if you need that money before traditional retirement age, like 59 and a half.
So you shouldn't let an unvested employer match trap you in a bad job if a much better opportunity comes along.
That's the argument. The match is great, free money if you're there, definitely take it, but don't let it be golden handcuffs preventing you from pursuing much higher scalable income elsewhere. Accessible capital is often prioritized early on. Things like Roth conversions are mentioned as a later stage strategy.
What about cash or gold, crypto?
The book tends to view these more like forms of cash or maybe inflation hedges, useful for diversifying your cash position perhaps, but probably not the primary engine that's going to generate the significant passive income needed for early financial freedom all by themselves.
So how do you actually get these real assets, especially starting out?
For most people starting as regular employees, the book emphasizes the most controllable path initially is just hardcore earning and saving. Build up that capital first. Later, reinvesting returns, building your own businesses, or getting equity compensation become more significant, but earning and saving is the engine you control most directly at the start.
And once you have that capital, say that $100 K plus A, the focus shifts to making it grow. But the book warns against obsessing over tiny percentage gains on small amounts, right?
Exactly. The Brian example nails this. Who cares if you get an amazing 20% return, doubling your $1,000 investment? You made $1,000. Nice, but it doesn't move the needle towards freedom.
But a solid, maybe less spectacular return on a larger amount.
That's where it matters. Getting, say, 10% or 15% return on $100,000, that's $10,000 or $15,000 a year, over $1,000 a month potentially, that starts to build real passive income. The insight is focus on aggressively stockpiling capital first through earning and saving. ROI becomes much more meaningful when the amount invested is substantial. Don't sweat chasing an extra 1% on $5,000 when earning an extra $10,000 is more achievable.
And in terms of how to invest that capital, the book favors simplicity.
Generally, yes. Low-cost, diversified index funds are often recommended over trying to actively pick stocks or time the market. It even uses the Matt example, an investment banker, to show how hard beating the market consistently actually is, even for professionals. Keep costs low, stay diversified.
And all this investing builds towards your specific target number for financial freedom. How do you figure that out?
The book leans heavily on the 4% rule, which comes from research by William Bengen. It's a guideline for a safe withdrawal rate.
Explain the 4% rule simply.
The basic idea is that, historically, if you have a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, you could withdraw about 4% of its value in the first year of retirement, adjust that amount for inflation each following year, and have a very high probability that your money would last for at least 30 years.
So if you figure out you need, say, $40,000 a year to live the life you want,
Then you multiply that by 25, which is the inverse of 4%, or 1 divided by 0.04. So $40,000 times 25 equals $1 million. That's your target number. $1 million in investable assets.
that gives you a really clear goal to shoot for.
Absolutely. It makes it tangible. Now, the book does mention you might adjust this. Maybe use a more conservative 3% rate for a $1.33 MEM target for 40K spending if you want extra safety, or maybe a bit higher, like 5% $800 K target. If you have more flexibility, plan to earn some side income, or could cut costs easily if needed.
But ultimately, the single biggest factor influencing how quickly you reach that number and how big that number needs to be comes back to
Your lifestyle, your spending. It's the denominator in the equation. Every single dollar you add to your planned annual expenses requires another $25 in assets to support it, assuming the 4% rule.
wow. So cutting costs doesn't just help you save more now.
It also shrinks the ultimate target you need to hit. It accelerates things from both ends. That's why the book constantly emphasizes ruthlessly pruning unnecessary expenses. Less spending equals faster accumulation and a smaller mountain to climb. It's incredibly powerful.
Okay, this whole all-out approach sounds intense.
Yeah.
It clearly requires discipline. And the book emphasizes you can't just wing it. You need systems.
Yeah.
Which brings us to mastering your money and your time through tracking and habits.
Yeah, this part is critical. The underlying principle is super simple but incredibly powerful. What gets measured gets managed. You simply cannot make intentional progress if you don't actually know where you stand. Flying blind doesn't work.
So step 1, track your money rigorously.
Yes. Track your net worth, but the book stresses tracking real net worth. That means maybe excluding things like your primary home equity or car value because they don't produce income, while definitely including the debt on those false assets. The Sam example shows how someone can look wealthy on paper, but have very few income-producing assets.
And tracking spending is vital too. Not necessarily for strict budgeting every single day,
But
but
for diagnosis, you need to know where your money is actually going so you can identify the big areas where changes will have the most impact. You can't optimize if you don't know the starting point. And of course, track your income and how your investments are performing.
thankfully, there are tools now like Mint, Personal Capital, YNE, that make this tracking much easier than it used to be.
Definitely leverage technology. The goal is actionable data, understanding the trends. But it's not just about money. The book argues you need the same intentionality with your time.
Which means actually writing down your goals.
Yes, make them concrete. Annual goals, quarterly goals, break them down into weekly, even daily actions. The act of writing forces clarity. Even small daily goals matter, like spend 30 minutes researching house hacking options or set up Mint account. Using a daily log to track where your time really goes can also be eye-opening.
The book outlines several really powerful habits to build for this.
Absolutely. Things like consistent goal setting and review sessions may be annually for the big picture, quarterly to check progress, weekly to plan the specifics. Consistency is key.
Daily planning too.
Crucial. Prioritizing the most important tasks first thing. Maybe setting aside dedicated quiet time for deep work without interruptions. The book even suggests things like action blocks for handling meetings or calls efficiently.
And those monthly money dates sound non-negotiable.
They really should be. Setting aside time each month, maybe with your partner if you have one, to go through everything. Review accounts, track spending categories, check income, investment performance, calculate net worth. It keeps you accountable, helps you spot problems early, celebrate wins, and consciously plan for the next month. It takes discipline, but prevents drifting off course.
The link between health habits, eating well, exercising, and finance might seem a bit indirect at first.
But it makes total sense in this framework. It's partly about avoiding huge long-term health costs, sure, but it's also about having the energy, the focus, the mental clarity right now to perform at your best, whether that's earning more, managing properties, or making smart decisions. It's another habit that requires planning and consistency, just like tracking your finances.
And in today's world, managing digital distractions seems essential.
Totally. The book mentions strategies like aiming for inbox zero, batching email checks, instead of constant notifications, maybe using tools like Pause Gmail. Using website blockers like blocksite.co to consciously limit time on distracting sites. Your time is incredibly valuable, especially early on. Protecting it fiercely is key.
Finally, the book talks about networking and luck. How does luck fit into this planned approach?
The insight is that luck isn't entirely random. You can and should position yourself for it, be where opportunities might happen.
Like the Jenna example, opportunities came from getting out and meeting people, not staying home.
Exactly. Or Scott Trench's own story, meeting his future mentor and getting invited to a mastermind group, started with a casual conversation in a park while pursuing his interests. It means intentionally putting yourself in environments, connecting with people who are aligned with your goals or who you can learn from. But you have to know your goals first to know who to connect with.
And while all this tracking and data is important, the book adds a final nuance. Trust your gut sometimes.
Yeah. Especially on big decisions, taking a job, buying a specific property, selling an asset. Data and logic are crucial, absolutely. But sometimes your intuition, your gut feeling, picks up on things the spreadsheet doesn't capture. The best decisions often blend logic, emotion, and data. Don't be afraid to listen to that inner voice, too. So wrapping up this book talk on Set for Life, the core message is just crystal clear, isn't it? Early financial freedom isn't some fantasy. It's not just for the super lucky or the already rich.
No, it's presented as something genuinely achievable, even if you're starting with an average income. But, and it's a big but, it demands a conscious, deliberate, really an all-out approach. You have to choose it.
Yeah, it means making choices that often go directly against what everyone around you, friends, family, society considers normal or sensible.
It means focusing intensely on boosting your scalable income, not just getting small raises. It means radically rethinking and reducing lifestyle costs, especially that huge one. Housing, maybe even turning it into an asset through house hacking.
And then taking every spare dollar you generate from that difference and aggressively investing it in real income-producing assets, systematically, consistently.
And the whole thing is powered by meticulous tracking.
Yeah.
Knowing your numbers, knowing where your time goes, and building those strong supportive habits around your finances, your productivity, your goals.
It absolutely requires discipline. It requires focus. And yeah, the book acknowledges it can feel a bit different, maybe even isolating sometimes because you're swimming against the current. But the payoff is presented as immense.
Which is?
True freedom. The freedom to design your life, to live on your terms, to pursue work you love or not work at all years or even decades sooner than the traditional retirement path allows. It's possible, but it demands that you be intentional. It demands you take action starting today.
So the real question the book leaves you with is, what's one thing, what single, maybe small action could you take today, right now, based on these ideas, to nudge yourself just one step closer to your vision of financial freedom? How will you grab that opportunity for choice?
That's really been our book talk on Set for Life. I think the biggest takeaway is just the power of intentionality. Making deliberate choices about earning more, spending way less, investing the difference, and then tracking everything that combination can genuinely compress the timeline to freedom.
It definitely makes you question the status quo, doesn't it? And think hard about what you're really prioritizing with your most valuable resources, your time and your money. We really hope this discussion sparks some ideas, maybe some motivation for your own journey.
Thanks so much for joining us for this Book Talk Finance. If you found this valuable, if you want to keep exploring these kinds of powerful ideas and practical strategies, definitely hit that subscribe button on the channel.
We'd love to have you back for the next one.